Joe Martinez was just trying to make ends meet in his small-town auto shop. With 3 months of unpaid rent and final notice bills piling up, he could barely keep the lights on. But when 8-year-old Tommy Wilson's wheelchair broke down in front of his garage, Joe didn't hesitate. He spent the entire night fixing it, refusing to take a single dollar from Tommy's single mother. He thought that was the end of it. But someone had been watching, and by morning his simple act of kindness had reached the highest office in the nation. What happened next would change not just Joe's life, but the entire country's perspective on everyday heroes. How could one mechanic's selfless act spark a movement that would reach all the way to the White House? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The red toolbox sat on Joe Martinez's workbench like a war memorial. Its scratched surface and worn leather handle told stories of 30 years of honest work. First in his father's hands, now in his own. Every morning, Joe would run his fingers across the dented metal before opening the shop, remembering his father's words. Tools don't just fix machines, mijo. They fix problems, and where there's a problem, there's a person who needs help. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Martinez Auto Repair, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Joe stood at his desk, sorting through a stack of bills that seemed to grow taller every day. Final notice stamped in angry red letters across most of them. 3 months behind on rent. The electric company threatening to cut power by the end of the week. He sighed, running a calloused hand through his salt and pepper hair. At 48, he had the weathered look of someone who'd spent a lifetime working with his hands. His father had looked the same way at his age, though Miguel Martinez had managed to keep the shop profitable even through the recession of the early 90s. Different times, Joe muttered to himself, picking up an old framed photograph from his desk. In it, a younger version of himself stood proudly beside his father in front of the newly painted shop sign. 1992, the year his father had finally put his name on the lease too. The year before the cancer took Miguel, leaving Joe to carry on alone. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Joe from his memories. Mrs. Henderson, 83 and still, driving her 85 Buick, shuffled in with her usual warm smile. "Joe, honey, she's making that noise again." "The ticking when you turn left?" Joe smiled, already reaching for his keys. Mrs. Henderson had been coming to the shop since before he was born. "You know it. Miguel always said you had the best ears in the business. Dad also said you were his favorite customer." Joe walked out to the Buick, Mrs. Henderson following slowly behind. Though he probably told that to everyone. "Oh, he did," she laughed. "But we all believed it because he made everyone feel special, just like you do, Joe." The ticking sound was obvious as soon as he turned the key. A loose heat shield, nothing major. 10 minutes of work, tops. But as he looked at Mrs. Henderson's hopeful face, he knew he couldn't charge her full price. Not when she was living on Social Security, counting every penny just like him. "Let me take a quick look," he said, grabbing his father's toolbox. The familiar weight in his hand brought comfort, like shaking hands with an old friend. As he worked, his mind drifted to the stack of bills waiting on his desk. The shop had been struggling for months now, ever since Miller's Automotive opened. Their shiny new facility on the edge of town, complete with a waiting room that looked more like a hotel lobby and free Wi-Fi. They offered financing options Joe couldn't match and flashy promotions he couldn't afford. But Miller's wouldn't know that Mrs. Henderson's late husband had helped Miguel Martinez secure the loan to open this shop. They wouldn't remember that she brought soup every day for a week when Joe had the flu last winter. Some things were worth more than money. That's what his father had always said. 20 minutes later, the heat shield was secured and Mrs. Henderson was digging through her purse for her wallet. "How much do I owe you, honey?" Joe waved her off. "Call it a checkup. Just promise you'll let me know if that ticking comes back." Her eyes welled up. "Miguel would be so proud of you. Joe, so proud." She patted his cheek like she had when he was a boy, then shuffled back to her car. Joe watched her drive away, the Buick's engine purring smoothly now. His father's voice echoed in his memory. A mechanic fixes cars, mijo, but a good man fixes problems. The weight of the toolbox in his hand seemed heavier somehow. Inside his office, the stack of bills waited, indifferent to good deeds and family legacies. But as Joe set the toolbox back on his workbench, he stood a little straighter. Some things were worth more than money, even if the bank didn't see it that way. Sarah Wilson knew exactly how many steps it took from their front door to Tommy's school, 8:47. She'd counted them every morning for the past 2 years, pushing her son's wheelchair through cracked sidewalks and uneven pavement. The chair itself was a testament to perseverance, second-hand when they got it, with mismatched armrests and wheels that needed constant adjustment. But like everything else in their lives, they made it work. "Mum, did you remember to pack my dinosaur book?" Tommy's voice drifted up from beneath the worn Yankees cap he refused to take off, even indoors. At 8 years old, he had their morning routine memorized better than she did. "Right here, buddy." She patted the backpack hanging from the wheelchair's handles. "Though I think Mrs. Peterson might want you to read something else for show and tell. This week, you've brought this one 3 times already." "But I keep finding new facts." His enthusiasm made the chair wobble slightly. "Did you know that some scientists think T-Rexes might have had feathers, like giant, scary chickens?" Sarah smiled, navigating around a particularly stubborn crack in the sidewalk. The morning sun cast long shadows ahead of them, and she could already feel the familiar ache in her lower back. The medical bills from Tommy's last surgery had eaten through their savings, leaving nothing for a new wheelchair. The social worker had put them on a waiting list for assistance, but that had been 6 months ago. They passed Martinez Auto Repair, its faded sign a familiar landmark on their daily journey. Sarah had seen the owner sometimes, working late into the night. There was something about him that reminded her of David, Tommy's father, before the accident. The same quiet dedication to his work, the same gentle way with people. "Mom!" Tommy's voice pulled her from her thoughts, the wheels making that sound again. She heard it too, a grinding whine that seemed to get worse with each rotation. The right wheel had been sticking more lately, requiring increasingly creative adjustments with her limited tool set at home. "We'll oil it when we get home, sweetie. Just a few more blocks to—" The wheel caught on something, jerking the chair to a sudden stop. Tommy lurched forward, saved from falling only by his seatbelt. The metal gave an ominous groan, and Sarah's heart sank as she saw the wheel bend at an unnatural angle. "Are you okay?" She knelt in front of Tommy, checking him over even as he assured her he was fine. "I'm okay, Mom. Really." He tried to smile, but she could see the worry in his eyes. The same worry she felt crushing her chest. They were stuck. The chair wouldn't move forward or backward, and even if she could carry Tommy, the school was still 4 blocks away. Her phone was dead. She'd forgotten to charge it last night after working a double shift at the diner. The sound of a garage. Dr. Opening made them both look up. Joe Martinez stood in the entrance of his shop, wiping his hands on a red rag. His eyes took in the scene, the bent wheel, Tommy's worried face, Sarah's barely contained panic. "Having some trouble?" His voice was gentle, without pity. He approached slowly, as if giving them time to refuse his help. "The wheel," Sarah gestured helplessly. "We can't afford—" "Let's take a look." He was already kneeling beside the chair, examining the damage with practiced eyes. "I'm Joe, and you must be the young man I see passing by every morning with that Yankees cap." "I'm Tommy!" The boy's face lit up. "Do you like baseball too?" "Cardinals fan myself, but don't hold that against me." Joe winked, then turned to Sarah. "I think we can fix this. Would you like to bring it inside?" Sarah hesitated, looking at her watch. "Tommy's already late for school, and I have to get to work." "I can call the school," Joe offered, "and give you a ride to work after. Looks like this might take a little while to fix properly." The kindness in his eyes nearly undid her. It had been so long since anyone had offered help without expecting something in return. She thought of the empty wallet in her purse, the maxed-out credit cards. We can't pay. Let's fix the problem first, Joe interrupted gently. Everything else can wait. Tommy looked up at her with hope-filled eyes, and Sarah felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Sometimes help came from unexpected places. Sometimes you just had to be brave enough to accept it. Under the fluorescent lights of Martinez Auto Repair, Joe's shadow danced across the concrete floor as he worked. The wheelchair sat elevated on his workbench, its damaged wheel telling a story of countless miles across uneven sidewalks. The clock on the wall read 8:47 p.m., hours after he'd promised Sarah he'd have it ready, but this job needed more than just a quick fix. "Pass me that 3/8 socket, would you, buddy?" Joe glanced at Tommy, who sat in a borrowed office chair, eagerly watching every move. After Joe had driven Sarah to her evening shift at the diner, Tommy had begged to stay and watch the repair. Tommy held up the correct tool, pride beaming from his face. "Perfect. You've got a good eye." Joe accepted the socket, their brief interaction reminding him of similar moments with his father. "Your mom said you like learning how things work?" "Yeah. I want to be an engineer when I grow up, or maybe a paleontologist, or both." Tommy rolled his chair closer, careful not to get in the way. "Could you explain what you're doing?" Joe smiled, remembering his own childhood curiosity. "Well, see this bearing here? It's worn out because..." As he worked, Joe explained each step, surprised by Tommy's sharp questions and genuine interest. The boy absorbed information like a sponge, reminding Joe of himself at that age, always. Hanging around his father's shop, the security camera's red light blinked steadily in the corner, recording their late-night repair session. Joe had installed it last year after a break-in, though it rarely captured anything more interesting than his long hours of solitary work. "My dad used to fix things too," Tommy said quietly, after Joe finished explaining about load distribution and wheel alignment. "Before the accident. Mom doesn't talk about him much, but I remember him always having tools in his hands." Joe paused, looking at the boy's face. There was something there, not sadness exactly, but a kind of wistful understanding that seemed beyond his years. "Sometimes the best way to remember people is by doing what they taught us," Joe said carefully, thinking of his own father. "I bet he'd be proud of how much you know about tools already." Tommy smiled, but his eyes drifted to the wheelchair. "Mom works really hard, you know. She thinks I don't notice, but I do. She skips dinner sometimes so I can have enough." The words hit Joe like a physical blow. He thought of the bills on his desk, his own skipped meals, but his struggles were different. He was an adult. He had choices. Tommy and his mom. A noise from outside made them both look up. Through the shop's windows, they could see Sarah returning from her shift, exhaustion evident in her walk. Joe glanced at the clock, 11:23 p.m. He'd lost track of time. "Mom!" Tommy rolled his borrowed chair to the door as Sarah entered. "You should see what Joe taught me about bearings and torque and..." "Tommy, honey, it's way past your bedtime." But Sarah was smiling, some of her tiredness falling away at her son's excitement. She turned to Joe. "I'm so sorry we kept you this late. I can try to..." "Almost done," Joe interrupted, not wanting to hear another attempt to pay him. "Just need to test the alignment. Tommy's been a great help." The security camera whirred slightly as it adjusted position, capturing Sarah's grateful smile, Tommy's proud grin, and Joe's determined focus as he made the final adjustments. Just another night in a small-town auto shop, but somehow it felt like something more. Working through the night wasn't new to Joe. He'd done it countless times for various repairs, but this felt different. Each adjustment, each careful calibration, was a message. You're not alone. Someone sees your struggle. Someone cares. As midnight approached, Joe stepped back to examine his work. The wheelchair looked better than it had in years. Not just the repaired wheel, but all the small issues he'd noticed and fixed along the way. The wobbly armrest, the squeaky front caster, the fraying brake cable. His father would have done the same. "All set," he announced, helping Tommy transfer back to his chair. "Let's test it out." Tommy's whoop of joy as he discovered how smoothly the chair now moved echoed through the shop. Sarah stood watching, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears in her eyes. "I can't possibly," she began. "No charge," Joe said firmly. "Sometimes things just need fixing." The security camera kept recording as Sarah hugged him, as Tommy demonstrated his newfound mobility with increasingly daring spins, as the small group shared a moment of pure, uncomplicated kindness in the late-night quiet of Martinez Auto Repair. None of them noticed the neighbor across the street, filming the entire scene through his window, capturing a simple act of compassion that would soon touch millions. Bill Chen hadn't meant to stay up so late. At 67, his insomnia often left him watching the world through his second-story apartment window, observing the quiet life of their small town. But tonight was different. For hours, he'd watched the scene unfolding in Martinez Auto Repair through his phone's camera lens. "You've got to see this," he texted his daughter Rachel, a journalist in Chicago, attaching the video. "Real humanity in action." The video wasn't professional quality, but it captured everything. Joe working late into the night, teaching Tommy about tools, the mother's return, the emotional conclusion. Bill had even managed to catch the audio of Joe refusing payment, though it was faint through the shop's walls. Rachel's response came immediately. "Dad, this is incredible. Mind if I share it?" By 6 a.m., as Joe was unlocking his shop for another day, Rachel's post had already been shared thousands of times. Local news stations were picking it up, and a popular morning show producer had marked it priority follow-up. "Did you see this?" became the morning's common greeting around town. Parents watching their morning news saw it over coffee. Teachers showed it to their classes as a lesson in kindness. By noon, the video had crossed state lines, touching hearts from Maine to California. At the diner where Sarah worked, customers began recognizing her. Tips grew larger, often accompanied by notes. "For Tommy's college fund," or simply, "Pass it." "Forward." She didn't understand what was happening until her manager called her into the back room to show her the viral video on his phone. "Oh my God," she whispered, watching the previous night play out from a stranger's perspective. The care in Joe's movements, Tommy's evident joy, her own emotional response, it was all there, intimate yet universal. Meanwhile, Joe remained oblivious. He'd been under a Chevy since dawn, replacing a transmission. The constant ping of his shop's landline went ignored. He never answered while working on a car. His ancient flip phone lay forgotten in his desk drawer, its dozen voicemail notifications unread. It wasn't until Gloria Martinez, his sister in Phoenix, finally got through that he learned what was happening. "Hermanito, you're famous!" Her voice burst with pride. "It's everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, the morning shows." Mom would be crying. Happy tears if she could see this. "What are you talking about?" Joe slid out from under the car, confusion evident in his voice. "Check your phone, stubborn mule. Check the internet. Better yet, just turn on your TV." Joe walked to the small television he kept in the waiting area, mainly for customers during long repairs. As it flickered to life, he found himself staring at his own shop, his own actions from the night before. "A remarkable display of community spirit and compassion," the news anchor was saying. The video, which has now been viewed over 2 million times, shows local mechanic Joe Martinez spending hours repairing a disabled child's wheelchair, free of charge. The bell above his door chimed. Joe turned to find Tommy and Sarah standing there, looking both embarrassed and moved. "I guess we're all a little famous now," Sarah said softly. "I hope you don't mind." Joe looked back at the TV, where they were interviewing Bill Chen about capturing the moment. The neighbor's words caught his attention. "In a world where we're also divided, sometimes it takes a simple act of kindness to remind us of our shared humanity." Simple act, that's all it had been. Just fixing something that needed fixing, like his father had taught him. Yet somehow it had touched something in people, awakened some hunger for good news, for proof that compassion still existed in the world. His phone rang again. This time he answered. "Mr. Martinez," a warm, professional voice said. "This is Claire Thompson from Good Morning America. We'd love to have you, Tommy, and Ms. Wilson on tomorrow's show. Would you be willing to share your story with our viewers?" Joe looked at Sarah and Tommy, still standing in his doorway. Behind them, he could see people gathering outside the shop, some with phones raised, others just watching with warm smiles. The world was about to get a lot bigger than his small-town auto shop. But looking at Tommy's bright eyes and Sarah's grateful smile, he knew his father would have said yes. Because some stories needed to be told, some light needed to be shared. "Yes," he said simply, "I think we would." President Michael Coleman's morning briefing usually focused on crisis points and policy initiatives. But today, his chief of staff, Diana Warren, had something different on the agenda. "Sir, before we get to the Middle East update, there's a video you need to see." Diana handed him her tablet. Her usually serious expression softened by something that looked like hope. The president adjusted his reading glasses, noting the view counter, 12 million and climbing. As he watched the nighttime scene unfold in Martinez Auto Repair, his expression changed from polite interest to deep engagement. "Play it again," he requested after it ended. This time he leaned forward, studying the details, the mechanic's patient explanations to the boy, the mother's exhausted gratitude, the quiet dignity of it all. "Diana, tell me everything we know about this man." She was ready with the file. Joe Martinez, age 48, second-generation owner of Martinez Auto Repair. His father, Miguel, started the business in 1975 after emigrating from Mexico. Joe took over in 1993 when his father passed away from cancer. He's been running it ever since, though financial records show the business has been struggling lately. The president stood, walking to the Oval Office window. "He reminds me of my father," he said quietly. "Dad had a hardware store in Cleveland. Used to do the same thing, fix things for people who couldn't afford to pay. Nearly bankrupted us a few times." Diana waited, knowing her boss well enough to see where this was heading. "The thing is," the president continued, "we keep talking about rebuilding America's spirit, about bringing communities together. We make speeches and launch initiatives, but this," he gestured at the tablet, "this man did more in one night than all our programs combined." "Sir," Diana could feel the energy shift in the room. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow. We're going to visit that auto shop." "Mr. President, with all due respect, the logistics of arranging a presidential visit will be complicated, yes. But this is important, Diana. This is the America we need to celebrate." He turned from the window, his decision made. Make it happen. The next hour erupted in controlled chaos. The Secret Service was notified, advanced teams mobilized. The small town's mayor was woken by a call that seemed too surreal to be true. In the White House Communications Office, Press Secretary Mark Chen was already crafting the narrative. President Coleman celebrates American spirit in surprise visit to small-town hero. "We need background on everyone," Diana instructed her. "Team, the mechanic, the family, the neighbor who filmed it. Full security checks, but handle it quietly. We don't want to spoil the surprise." Satellite images of the auto shop and surrounding areas appeared on screens. Secret Service agents began mapping routes and contingencies. The presidential helicopter crew was put on standby. In the midst of the whirlwind, the president sat at his desk watching the video one more time. He picked up his personal phone and dialed a number from memory. "Hey, Pop," he said when his father answered. "Remember how you used to fix Mrs. Johnson's screen door every spring and never let her pay? I just saw something that reminded me of that." Meanwhile, in a secure room down the hall, Secret Service agent Sarah Keller was reviewing security, footage of Martinez Auto Repair from the past month. She noticed something interesting, a pattern of similar acts of kindness. Joe fixing an elderly man's cane, adjusting a student's bicycle, helping a stranded motorist late at night. "This isn't a one-time thing," she reported to her superior. "This is who he is." The information made its way to Diana, who added it to her brief for the president. By noon, the operation was codenamed Kindness Carry, a designation that made the hardened Secret Service agents smile despite themselves. "Sir," Diana entered the Oval Office with final confirmations. "Everything's arranged. The advance team leaves in an hour. Local law enforcement has been notified, though they think it's for a different VIP visit. Media blackout is in place." The president nodded, still holding his father's photograph from the hardware store days. "Make sure we bring something," he said suddenly. "Sir, for the shop. My father always said you don't visit someone's workplace empty-handed." He smiled at the memory. "See what tools the shop might need, something meaningful." As Diana left to add this personal touch to the mountain of logistics, she heard the president on the phone again, this time with his speechwriter. "No, nothing. Formal. This isn't about politics. This is about recognizing the quiet heroes who hold our communities together. Yes, exactly. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the biggest impact." Outside the White House, the day continued as normal. But inside, an operation was unfolding that would transform a simple act of kindness into a national moment of unity and hope. Dawn had barely broken when the first unmarked vehicles began arriving in town. Men and women in dark suits appeared on street corners, their earpieces and alert postures setting off whispers among the early morning coffee crowd at May's diner. "Government types," May whispered to her regulars. "Something big's happening." Sarah Wilson, starting her morning shift, noticed the increased activity during her walk to work. The streets around Martinez Auto Repair were mysteriously clear of their usual morning traffic. Police officers stood at intersections, directing cars away from Joe's block. "Probably just a film crew," one officer told curious passers-by, "for the viral video story." But Bill Chen, watching from his apartment window, knew better. He'd seen presidential security preparations before, during his years as a photojournalist. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone to call Rachel. "You're not going to believe this," he said when she answered. Inside Martinez Auto Repair, Joe worked on as usual, though he couldn't help noticing the strange quiet outside. The morning news had finally died down about his video, and he was grateful for the return to normalcy. Or so he thought. Agent Keller stood across the street, coordinating with local law enforcement. "Remember, we maintain the film crew cover. Story until the last possible moment. POTUS wants the genuine reaction." Her earpiece crackled. "Eagle is 30 minutes out." The town's mayor, Howard Phillips, paced in his office, still stunned by the calls he'd received the night before. Secret Service had briefed him, sworn him to secrecy, and given him precise instructions about his role in the upcoming event. "Just act natural," they'd said, as if anything about this day could be natural. Local news vans began arriving, thinking they were covering a follow-up to the viral video story. Reporter Jenny Martinez, no relation to Joe, did her standard morning stand-up. "We're here at Martinez Auto Repair, where local mechanic Joe Martinez's act of kindness has captured hearts across the nation. Little does he know." She stopped, noticing the signal from her producer. Something was happening. The distinctive sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. Inside his shop, Joe looked up from the engine he was working on. The sound was getting louder, and now he could hear a commotion outside. Setting down his wrench, he walked to the door. The street had transformed. Secret Service agents stood at attention. Police officers cleared the growing crowd to the sidewalks, and there, descending from the sky, was Marine One. "What in the world?" Joe muttered. The helicopter landed in the cleared parking lot of the community center across the street. Time seemed to slow as the door opened, and a familiar figure emerged. "Is that—" Joe couldn't finish the sentence. President Coleman stepped onto the pavement, straightened his jacket, and began walking directly toward Martinez Auto Repair. The morning sun caught the presidential seal on Marine One, making it gleam like a beacon. The crowd that had gathered burst into cheers and applause. Phones rose in the air, capturing the moment. Sarah and Tommy, who had been asked to come to the shop for an interview, stood speechless near the entrance. Joe felt rooted to the spot as the President of the United States approached his shop's door. Secret Service agents had already swept through the building, but they maintained a respectful distance, letting the moment unfold naturally. "Mr. Martinez," President Coleman said warmly, extending his hand, "I believe we have something in common. We both learned about fixing things from our fathers." Joe shook the offered hand automatically, his mind struggling to process what was happening. Behind the president, he could see news cameras, crowd barriers, and what seemed like the entire town gathered to witness this moment. "Sir, this isn't—" Joe searched for words. "This is exactly where I need to be today," the president finished for him. He gestured to an aide who stepped forward carrying what looked like an old toolbox. "I brought something for your shop. It belonged to my father. He'd want another good man to have it." As the morning sun rose higher over the small town, casting long shadows across the presidential seal and the faded sign of Martinez Auto Repair, two men stood in a doorway talking about fathers, kindness, and the tools that build both machines and communities. Inside Martinez Auto Repair, the morning light filtered through windows now lined with Secret Service agents. President Coleman ran his hand along Joe's workbench, pausing at the worn spots where countless tools had rested over decades. "My father's bench had these same marks," the president said softly. 30 years of fixing screen doors, lawnmowers, anything the neighbors needed." He turned to Joe. "Your father was from Mexico, I understand?" "Yes, sir. Guadalajara." Joe found his voice steadying as he spoke about family. "Came here in '72, with nothing but his tools and a dream of his own shop." President Coleman nodded toward Tommy and Sarah, who stood nearby with a mix of awe and nervousness. "And now you're carrying on his legacy in ways he probably never imagined." "I just fixed a wheelchair, sir." Joe shrugged modestly. "Anyone would have done the same, would they?" The president's eyes crinkled. "My father's hardware store went under in '85. Too many unpaid bills, too many repairs done for free. The bank called it poor business sense." He paused, looking around the shop. "But every Christmas for years after, people would still come by. Our house with cookies, cards, stories about how Dad had helped them when they needed it most." Joe thought about his own stack of unpaid bills, about Mrs. Henderson's Buick, and countless other repairs done at cost or free. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was, still is." The president gestured to the toolbox his aide had brought. "That's why I brought this. Dad's tools should be with someone who understands their real purpose." Together, they opened the toolbox. Inside, each tool bore the marks of years of use. A hammer with a worn handle, screwdrivers with tips rounded. From countless turns, wrenches that had loosened and tightened the nuts and bolts of a community. "Sir," Joe began, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Michael," the president corrected. "Just Michael right now, because I'm not here as president. I'm here as someone who watched your video and saw my father, saw every person who's ever chosen kindness over profit, community over convenience." Tommy wheeled closer, curiosity overcoming his shyness. "Did your dad teach you about tools too?" The president smiled, kneeling to the boy's level. "He sure did, though I was never as good with them as Mr. Martinez here. That's why I went into politics instead. Different kind of fixing." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as she watched. Her son chat with the President of the United States about socket wrenches and torque settings. The shop's security camera recorded it all. Another quiet moment of connection that would soon be shared with millions. "You know, Joe," the president said, standing again, "what you did here, it's more than just fixing a wheelchair. You showed people that the America we remember, the one where neighbors help neighbors, where community means something. It's still here." "It never left, Sir Michael," Joe corrected himself. "It's in every town, every neighborhood. Maybe we just stopped looking for it. Then maybe it's time we started looking again." The president's expression grew thoughtful. How would you feel about helping me with that?" Before Joe could answer, a commotion outside drew their attention. The crowd had grown, and through the windows they could see people holding handmade signs. "Thank you, Joe. Small acts, big hearts. Martinez for president," the president laughed. "Looks like you've got some competition for my job." "No, thank you, sir. I've got enough trouble keeping this place running." "About that," the president's tone shifted slightly. "My team did some research. You're not the only small business owner choosing community over profits. What if we could help change the system so people wouldn't have to choose?" Joe looked at Tommy, now examining the president's father's tools with expert interest. At Sarah, standing proud despite her exhaustion. At the crowd outside, full of familiar faces. His community. "I'm listening," he said. And there, in a small auto shop that smelled of oil and hope, the President of the United States and a small-town mechanic began planning how to turn one act of kindness into a movement that would touch lives across the nation. The security camera kept recording, capturing not just history, but humanity at its finest. The headlines exploded across the nation within hours of the President's visit. President makes surprise visit to viral mechanic. Small-town hero meets commander-in-chief. From wheelchair repair to White House recognition. Every major network had their version of the story, and drone footage showed the presidential helicopter landing in the small town. Cameras captured the moment Joe opened his shop door to find the president standing there. Social media erupted with clips of Tommy showing the president his newly smooth-rolling wheelchair. In the CNN newsroom, anchors dissected the significance. "This isn't just a feel-good story anymore," political analyst David Chen remarked. "When the president shows up at your door, it becomes a statement about American values." Back at Martinez Auto Repair, Joe struggled to keep up with the interview requests. His phone rang constantly until Sarah, who had taken the day off from the diner, started screening calls. NPR at 2, local news at 3, and Good Morning America wants you live via satellite tomorrow morning. She read from her hastily scribbled list. "Joe, you need a secretary." "I need a break is what I need," he replied, though his smile was genuine. "How's Tommy handling all this?" "Are you kidding? He's already written a report for his class titled, 'The Day the President Learned About.' Dorke settings from me." Outside, the crowd had thinned but not disappeared. People kept dropping by with food, cards, and their own repair stories. Mrs. Henderson brought her famous apple pie and couldn't stop hugging Joe. "I knew you were special, honey." We all did. Bill Chen's original video had gained another 20 million views since the president's visit. News organizations were calling him too, wanting to know what made him film that night. "I couldn't not film it," he told reporters. "Some moments, you just know they're important, even before you understand." "Why?" Rachel, his daughter, had been promoted to senior editor after breaking the story first. She called her father during her lunch break. "Dad, you've started something bigger than all of us." She wasn't wrong. Martinez moment was trending nationwide, with people sharing their own stories of community kindness. A group of mechanics in Detroit started a program to repair mobility devices for free. A hardware store in Seattle announced Pay What You Can Tuesdays. The president's team released the official White House photos of the visit. One in particular caught the nation's imagination. Joe and President Coleman bent over the toolbox. Together, twin expressions of understanding on their faces. The caption read simply, "American values don't need translation." Major companies began reaching out. Home Depot offered to supply Joe's shop with new equipment. A wheelchair manufacturer wanted to partner with him for a community outreach program. Miller's Automotive, his big chain competitor, quietly withdrew their plans for expansion into the neighborhood. But it was the smaller gestures that touched Joe most deeply. A local third-grade class sent hand-drawn cards. A veterans group offered to help reorganize his filing system. Tommy's classmates started a Tips for Joe jar at their lemonade stand. Late that evening, As the media frenzy finally began to quiet, Joe sat in his office, looking at the president's father's toolbox. Sarah knocked gently on the doorframe. "Someone else here to see you," she said softly. An elderly man stepped into the office, leaning heavily on a cane. "You probably don't remember me," he said. "You fixed my cane's rubber tip last month. Wouldn't take any money for it." Joe remembered. It had been a 5-minute job, not worth mentioning. "My grandson saw you on TV today," the man continued. "Asked me if you were the same mechanic. When I said yes, he told me he'd decided to go to trade school instead of trying for that business degree he didn't really want. Said he wants to help people like you do." The man's eyes were wet. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest repairs. As the man left, Joe looked at his security camera's blinking light, still faithfully recording each moment. From one night of fixing a wheelchair to changing a young man's life path. Who could have predicted it? The evening news played quietly in the background. In a time of division, a simple act of kindness has united Americans around the idea that community still matters. This is more than a viral moment. This is a movement. The first draft of the Community Commerce Act landed on Senator Maria Rodriguez's desk exactly 1 week after the president's visit to Martinez Auto Repair. The bill proposed tax incentives for small businesses that provided services to disadvantaged community members, along with grants for equipment and training. "We're calling it the Martinez Initiative internally," the senator's aide explained. "The president wants this fast-tracked." In the House chamber, representatives from both parties found themselves in rare agreement. The viral video played on several lawmakers' tablets as they discussed amendments and additions. "My constituents keep asking why we can't have more stories like Joe Martinez," Congressman Thompson remarked during the morning session. "Well, maybe we can, if we give small businesses the support they need to choose community over profit." Meanwhile, Joe's story continued to spark change in unexpected ways. A tech startup in Silicon Valley launched an app connecting skilled workers with people who needed repairs but couldn't afford them. They named it Martinez Match. Local governments across the country began reviewing their policies on medical equipment repairs. The mayor of Chicago announced a pilot program providing grants to mechanics and repair shops willing to work with low-income families. But the most profound changes were happening at the grassroots level. In Portland, a group of retired engineers started a weekend workshop teaching basic wheelchair maintenance to families. A plumber in Miami began offering pay-what-you-can services every Wednesday. A bike shop in Austin created a program fixing children's bicycles for free. Back in nice Joe's town, the ripples were even more visible. The local Chamber of Commerce reported a surge in small business license applications. People weren't just opening shops. They were opening shops with community service built into their business models. Tommy's school principal called an assembly to discuss community service. When she asked how many students had been inspired by the Martinez story, every hand went up. "It's not just about fixing things," Tommy told his classmates, wheeling confidently onto the stage. "It's about fixing them for the right reasons." Sarah found herself invited to speak at a single-parent support group. "Before Joe fixed Tommy's wheelchair, I felt so alone," she shared. "Now I understand that community isn't just a place. It's a choice we make every day." The president's team kept in touch with Joe, sending weekly updates on the legislation's progress, but it was the personal note from President Coleman that meant the most. "Joe, my father called after seeing the video of our meeting. He cried, watching us open his old toolbox together. Said it felt like his life's work had found its purpose. Some tools fix machines, others fix communities. Turns out you're pretty good with both." Michael, even Miller's Automotive, the chain that had nearly put Joe out of business, announced a corporate policy change. They would now allocate 10% of their service hours to community assistance programs. Their CEO admitted in a press interview The Martinez video made us reevaluate our priorities. Sometimes competition isn't about who makes the most money, but who does the most good. Joe kept the newspaper clipping about the bill's progress pinned above his workbench next to his father's picture. The proposed law had grown beyond just repair shops. It now included provisions for all types of small businesses that demonstrated community impact. "Your papa would be proud," his sister Gloria told him during their weekly call. He always said business was about more than money. The security camera that had captured the original night's work now had company. Joe had installed a wall of photos showing other repairs, other moments of connection. Each picture told a story of community, of choices made to help rather than profit. One evening, as Joe was closing up shop, he found a small package on his doorstep. Inside was a letter from a mechanic in Seoul, South Korea, with pictures of their own community repair program. "Your story reached us here," the letter read. "Kindness needs no translation." The tools in President Coleman's father's toolbox had found new purpose, helping train a group of local teenagers who wanted to learn basic repair skills. Joe had started a weekly workshop, teaching not just mechanics, but the values that made tools worth using. "Sometimes," he told his students, "the biggest fixes start with the smallest choices." The town hall meeting was standing room only. Mayor Phillips had to open the adjacent courtyard, where people gathered around speakers broadcasting the proceedings inside. The agenda had one item: the Martinez effect, building our future. "I've lived here 40 years, May from the diner addressed the crowd, "and I've never seen anything like this. Last week, a tour bus stopped because they wanted to see the famous repair shop." A tour bus? In our town? The audience chuckled, but they understood. Their small town had become a symbol of something larger than itself. Local businesses reported record numbers, but it wasn't just about tourism. Something fundamental had shifted in the community's DNA. Joe sat quietly in the back, still uncomfortable with the tension. Sarah had convinced him to come, saying the community needed to see him there. Tommy sat beside him, proudly wearing his junior mechanic badge, a program Joe had started for local kids interested in learning basic repairs. "We've received calls from 17 other towns asking how to implement similar community service initiatives," the mayor announced. "But what they don't understand is that we didn't implement anything. We just finally noticed what was already here." He gestured toward Joe. "Mr. Martinez didn't start helping people because of a program or an initiative. He did it because that's who we are, or at least who we're supposed to be." The local bank manager stood up next. "In light of recent events, we're announcing a new community impact business loan program. Zero interest for small businesses that dedicate at least 15% of their services to community assistance." More announcements followed. The high school was adding a community service requirement for graduation. The local hardware store was starting a tool lending library. 3 other auto shops had joined Joe's initiative to provide free repairs for medical equipment. Mrs. Henderson, supported by her granddaughter, made her way to the microphone. "I've been bringing my Buick to Martinez Auto Repair for 20 years, she said, her voice wavering but clear. "Joe never charged me full price, even when I insisted. But it wasn't just about the money. He'd spend time explaining things, making sure I understood what my car needed. That's not service, that's community." The room erupted in applause. Joe felt his ears burning, but Tommy grabbed his hand and squeezed it proudly. Bill Chen, still documenting everything with his camera, captured the moment when the mayor unveiled the new town slogan: "Small town, big heart, home of the Martinez movement." "We've set up a community fund," the mayor continued, "to help support local businesses that want to follow Joe's example but worry about the financial impact. Already, we've received donations from across the country." The fund's first project would be renovating the old community center into a space for training programs, youth workshops, and community gatherings. They were calling it the Martinez Community Hub. "I know it's a lot to put on one name," the mayor said, looking at Joe, but sometimes we need a symbol to remind us of who we can be. After the meeting, people lingered in small groups, sharing ideas and making plans. The owner of the local bookstore was talking with the computer repair shop about combining their services for a literacy program. The dentist was discussing free clinics with other healthcare providers. Sarah found Joe still sitting in his chair, looking overwhelmed. "You okay?" she asked softly. "My father used to say that a community is like an engine," Joe replied. "Every part has to work together, but someone needs to provide the spark." He shook his head. "I never thought—" "You provided the spark, Joe, but all these people, they were ready to burn bright. They just needed permission to believe in something good again." Tommy wheeled up with a stack of papers. "Look, these are all the ideas my class came up with. For helping people." His enthusiasm was contagious as he spread out drawings and lists on Joe's lap. A local reporter captured the scene. Joe, Sarah, and Tommy huddled over children's drawings of a better community, while around them, their neighbors planned ways to turn those innocent visions into reality. Later that night, Joe added the town's new slogan to his wall of memories in the shop. Next to it, he pinned Tommy's drawing of the future Martinez Community Hub, complete with a rainbow and the words, "Where Helping Happens," written in careful, third-grade handwriting. The security camera blinked steadily, recording another quiet moment in a movement that had started with a simple choice to help. "My Hero" by Tommy Wilson, Grade 3, Mrs. Peterson read aloud to the class. "Would you like to share your essay with everyone, Tommy?" Tommy wheeled confidently to the front of the classroom, his chair moving smoothly and silently thanks to Joe's. Repairs. The president's visit had been 2 weeks ago, but Tommy still felt a surge of pride every time he thought about it. "Heroes don't always wear capes," Tommy began reading. "Sometimes they wear work clothes with oil stains and have calluses on their hands from fixing things. My hero is Joe Martinez, and he didn't save the world, he just fixed my wheelchair. But sometimes fixing one thing can fix a lot of other things too." The class listened intently. Many of them had been there the day the president came, but this was different. This was their friend telling his story. "Before Joe fixed my wheelchair, it was hard to keep up at recess. The wheel would stick and sometimes I'd be left behind. Mom would try to fix it, but she was always so tired from working. I pretended it was okay, but it wasn't." Tommy paused, looking up at his classmates. Jenny Martinez, no relation to Joe, gave him a thumbs up. She used a hearing aid that Joe had helped adjust when her family couldn't afford a new one. But then, one morning the wheel got really bad outside Joe's shop. Instead of just saying sorry like most people do, he helped. He worked all night fixing it, even though Mom couldn't pay him. He didn't know anyone was watching. He didn't know it would be on TV. He just did what was right. In the back of the classroom, Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Mrs. Peterson had invited her to hear Tommy's essay, knowing how important this moment was. "The president came to thank Joe, but that's not why Joe's my hero. He's my hero because he taught me that helping people is more important than making money. He's my hero because now he's teaching me and my friends about tools and fixing things, so we can help people too." Tommy wheeled over to the class display board, where pictures of their new after-school club hung. Joe's Junior Mechanics showed kids learning to fix bikes, adjust crutches, and help with basic repairs. "Last week we fixed Ms. Roberts' garden gate. She baked us cookies, but the best part was seeing her smile. Joe says that's the real payment, knowing you made someone's life a little better." Several students nodded. They'd been there for the gate repair, all wearing their junior mechanic badges proudly. "Some people think you have to be special to be a hero, but Joe taught me that being a hero is just about choosing to help when you can. It's about seeing what needs to be fixed and trying to fix it, even if you're not sure you can." Tommy pulled out a small wrench from his backpack, his first tool, a gift from Joe. "This isn't just a wrench, it's a way to help people. And maybe I can't walk, but I can learn to fix things. I can be like Joe. We all can." The class erupted in applause. Mrs. Peterson wiped her own eyes before speaking. "Thank you, Tommy. I think we all learned something important today." Later, at the Martinez Community Hub construction site, Tommy showed Joe his A-plus paper. They sat together watching volunteers work on the building. Tommy's essay, "Joining the Growing Wall of Community Stories." "You know what, Tommy?" Joe said quietly. "Heroes come in all sizes. Sometimes they're 8-year-old boys who remind grown-ups what really matters." Tommy grinned, his hand touching the wrench in his pocket. Around them, the hub was taking shape, a place where more kids would learn to fix things, where more heroes would be made. "Joe," Tommy asked, "can we start a wheelchair repair class for other kids like me?" Joe looked at the boy who had helped spark a national movement, who had met the president but was more excited about fixing a garden gate. "I think that's a perfect idea. Because you're right. Sometimes fixing one thing really does fix everything else." The setting sun cast long shadows through the hub's unfinished walls, but in those shadows you could see the future taking shape, one small repair at a time. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, just as Joe was opening the shop. The sender, Martinez Movement Foundation, New York City. "Dear Mr. Martinez," it began. "We're a group of business leaders, community organizers, and citizens inspired by your story. With your permission, we'd like to establish a national foundation in your name, dedicated to supporting small businesses that prioritize community service over profit." Joe sat at his desk, reading the email 3 times. The attachment showed their initial funding, $10 million in committed donations from major corporations and philanthropists. The board of directors included CEOs, community leaders, and, Joe's heart skipped, President Coleman's father as honorary chairman. His phone rang. It was Diana Warren, the president's chief of staff. "They're good people, Joe," she said without preamble. "We've vetted them thoroughly. They want to do this right." Across the country, the movement was already taking shape organically. In Seattle, a group of food truck owners had started Martinez Mondays, offering free meals to anyone in need. A Philadelphia barber gave free haircuts to job seekers. Chicago, mechanics had formed a network, providing wheelchair and mobility device repairs at no cost. The foundation would give structure to these scattered efforts. They proposed 3 main initiatives: grants for small businesses committed to community service, training programs teaching technical skills to underserved communities, and a national network connecting needs with skilled volunteers. "We don't want to change what's happening naturally," the foundation's proposed director explained during a video call. "We want to support it, expand it, make it sustainable." Sarah helped Joe set up a makeshift office in the shop's break room to handle the increasing administrative demands. Tommy appointed himself Chief Inspiration Officer, pinning up news, stories and letters from around the country. "Look at this one." He pointed to a story from Miami. "They're teaching kids how to fix bikes just like we do." The wall had become a testament to the movement's spread. Photos of community repair shops in Los Angeles, a medical equipment repair clinic in Houston, a tool lending library in Boston. Each project cited the Martinez movement as their inspiration. Corporate America took notice. Home Depot launched a community builders program, providing tools and materials to local repair initiatives. AutoZone created a Martinez grant for automotive students committed to community service. Even Miller's Automotive, now fully embracing the change, started a national apprenticeship program teaching both technical skills and community engagement. But it was the smaller stories that touched Joe most deeply. A letter from a 12-year-old girl in Kansas who fixed her neighbor's stairlift. A retired engineer in Florida who started teaching basic home repairs at his senior center. A group of veterans in Oregon forming a mobile repair unit for rural communities. The foundation's launch event was held in Washington, D.C. Joe initially resisted attending, but Tommy convinced him. "Heroes need to show up," he said with the simple wisdom of childhood, "so other people know it's real." Standing at the podium, looking out at faces both famous and ordinary, Joe thought of his father. The shop's first customer had paid with a dozen eggs because she had no money. Miguel Martinez had said it was a fair trade, not because he needed eggs, but because everyone deserved to have something to offer. "This movement isn't about me," Joe began his speech. "It's about all of us. About remembering that community isn't just where we live, it's how we live." The foundation announced its first major initiative, the Martinez Apprenticeship Program, providing technical training and business education to individuals committed to community service. The pilot program would launch in 50 cities with plans to expand nationwide. Back in his hotel room that night, Joe watched the evening news coverage. "The Martinez movement goes national," the headlines declared. But it was a smaller story that caught his attention. A local segment about a teenage girl who'd started fixing her classmates' phones and computers for free. "I saw the story about Mr. Martinez," she told the reporter. "It made me realize I could use what I know to help people. It's not about being famous or making money. It's about making things better, one fix at a time." Joe smiled, thinking of Tommy and his junior mechanics. The movement wasn't just about repairs anymore. It was about changing how people saw their role in their communities. The foundation's logo appeared on his laptop screen, a simple wrench crossed with an olive branch. Below it, the words his father had taught him long ago: "Some things are worth more than money." The next generation of fixers was rising, armed, not just with tools, but with purpose. And that, Joe realized, might be the most important repair of all. Joe stared at the bank statement on his desk, a stark reminder that fame didn't automatically solve everything. The shop's bills were paid now, thanks to the recent attention, but new challenges had emerged. Speaking requests, foundation meetings, and media appearances were eating into his repair time. Regular customers had to wait longer, and that didn't sit right with him. "You need to delegate," Sarah advised, sorting through a pile of mail. "You can't fix every car and run a national movement at the same time." She was right, but it wasn't that simple. His father had taught him that trust was built one repair at a time. How could he maintain that personal touch while scaling up? The bell chimed as Mrs. Henderson entered the shop. Joe's heart sank. He'd promised to look at her Buick's transmission 3 days ago. "I know you're busy with important things now," she began. "Nothing's more important than keeping my promises," Joe interrupted, grabbing his tools. But as he walked to her car, his phone buzzed with another urgent message from the foundation. They needed him to review grant applications for the apprenticeship program. Tommy, working on homework in his usual corner of the shop, watched Joe's internal struggle. "You know what you taught us in junior mechanics?" he piped up. "Every problem has a solution if you look at it the right way." Joe paused, wrench in hand. The boy had a point. Maybe he was approaching this wrong. "Mrs. Henderson," he said slowly, "how would you feel about helping me train someone? I've got a great apprentice mechanic who needs experience with transmissions." He gestured to Miguel Rodriguez, a recent high school graduate who'd been helping. Around the shop, the young man stepped forward nervously. "Just like old times," Mrs. Henderson smiled. "Your father trained you on my car too, remember?" As Miguel began working under Joe's guidance, something clicked. This was how you maintained the personal touch while growing, not by doing everything yourself, but by teaching others to care the way you did. Later that evening, after the shop closed, Joe sat with Sarah and Tommy, looking at old photographs. One showed his father training him, using that same patient approach he'd just used with Miguel. "I miss the simplicity sometimes," he admitted. "Just fixing cars, knowing exactly what needed to be done." "But look what you've started," Sarah gestured to the wall of news clippings. "All those people being helped, all those lives being changed." "I know, it's just—" Joe struggled to find the words. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not the right person for all this. I'm just a mechanic." Tommy wheeled closer. "That's why you're exactly the right person, because you don't want to be famous. You just want to help people." The wisdom in the boy's words struck home. Joe thought about the grant applications waiting for his review. Each one represented someone else who wanted to help their community, who needed the same chance his father had given him. His phone buzzed again. Another interview request. But this time, instead of stress, he felt something different. Each request was an opportunity to spread the message that ordinary people doing ordinary kindnesses could create extraordinary change. "Miguel did good work today," Sarah observed, watching Joe's expression shift. "Maybe it's time to build a real training program here. Show others how to carry on what your father started." Joe looked around his shop, at the president's father's toolbox, at Tommy's homework spread across the counter, at Miguel's careful notes from the day's lesson. The place was changing, growing beyond just repairs. And maybe that was okay. He picked up a framed photo of his father and placed it next to his new computer, where the Foundation's website glowed with stories of community impact across the nation. "You know what, Papa?" he whispered. "I think I finally understand. You weren't just teaching me to fix cars. You were teaching me to fix whatever needed fixing, even if it's the way people see their responsibility to each other." The security camera blinked, recording another quiet moment of transformation. Outside, the shop's sign still read, "Martinez Auto Repair." But inside, something bigger was taking shape. A blueprint for change, built one lesson at a time. The Senate chamber hummed with unusual energy. Staffers whispered that they hadn't seen this level of bipartisan cooperation since 9/11. On the floor, senators from both parties rose one after another to voice their support for what was now officially called the Martinez Community Commerce Act. In the visitors' gallery, Joe shifted uncomfortably in his borrowed suit. Tommy sat beside him in his wheelchair, both of them watching democracy in action. Sarah had taken the day off from the diner again, her pride evident as she watched the proceedings. Senator Rodriguez was speaking. "This bill isn't about government handouts. It's about recognizing and supporting what already exists in every community across America, people who choose to put their neighbors' needs alongside their bottom line." The bill had evolved far beyond its original scope. What started as tax incentives for repair shops had grown into comprehensive legislation, supporting community-focused small businesses of all kinds. Key provisions included tax credits for businesses providing free or reduced-cost services to low-income communities, grants for equipment and training programs, legal protection for repair shops working on medical devices, support for apprenticeship, programs teaching both technical skills and community service, creation of a national database connecting needs with skilled volunteers. The Martinez Act, as it was commonly known, had gathered support from an unlikely coalition. Fiscal conservatives appreciated its focus on small business and local control. Progressives praised its community impact. Business leaders recognized the value of social responsibility. President Coleman, watching from his office, smiled as the vote tally began. His father had called that morning emotional about seeing his old tools still helping people through. Joe's work. "In all my years in Congress," Senator Thompson declared, "I've never seen legislation that so perfectly captures the American spirit of neighbors helping neighbors." The vote wasn't even close. 92-8 in favor. As applause filled the chamber, Joe felt a tug on his sleeve. Tommy pointed to the electronic board displaying the votes. "Look, we did it, but the legislative victory was just the beginning." In the hallway, afterward, Joe found himself surrounded by senators and representatives, each eager to discuss implementation in their districts. "We've got a retired manufacturing plant that would be perfect for a training center," one congressman explained. "My state has rural communities that desperately need mobile repair services," another added. Joe listened, overwhelmed but increasingly confident. These weren't just politicians. They were people who saw what he'd seen all along. That community, and commerce could work together. President Coleman's signing ceremony was intentionally held not at the White House, but at Martinez Auto Repair. The shop had been transformed for the day, but Joe had insisted on leaving the oil stains and tool marks visible. "This is where the work happens," he'd said. "That's what we're celebrating." As the president prepared to sign, he gestured for Joe to join him. "This isn't just a law," he announced to the assembled crowd. "It's a reminder that the greatest changes often start with the smallest choices. One man fixing one wheelchair led to a national movement that will help millions." The pen touched paper, and the Martinez Act became law. But it was what happened next that caught the media's attention. "Now," the president said, rolling up his sleeves, "I believe we have some actual work to do." He gestured to where Tommy was organizing a junior mechanics demonstration. "These young people are going to show us how to fix a wheelchair properly." For the next hour, the President of the United States learned about torque settings and bearing maintenance from an 8-year-old boy in a wheelchair, while senators and cabinet members watched and took notes. Later that evening, after the crowds had gone, Joe sat in his office looking at the signed copy of the bill. Sarah found him there, still studying the document. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "About my father," Joe replied. "He always said that fixing things was about more than just the repair. It was about showing people they mattered." He smiled. "I don't think he meant for that lesson to end up as a law." "I think he'd be proud it did," Sarah said softly. Outside, the shop's sign glowed in the darkness. Below it, a new plaque had been installed, "Birthplace of the Martinez Act, where community comes first." The security camera recorded the quiet moment, adding it to the archive of a movement that had grown from a single act of kindness into a national commitment to community care. 1 year after the Martinez Act, "A Nation Transformed," read the headline in the Sunday paper. Joe folded it carefully, adding it to the archive wall in the newly expanded Martinez Community Hub. The original auto shop was still there, but it now shared space with classrooms, a tool library, and a community workshop. Tommy wheeled through the main entrance, now wearing a custom-made junior mechanics jacket with multiple certification patches. Behind him, a line of new students waited for their first class in the wheelchair repair program he'd helped design. "Ready for your speech, Mr. Wilson?" Joe asked with a grin. In the past year, Tommy had become something of a celebrity in the mobility repair community, his enthusiasm inspiring other kids with disabilities to learn repair skills. "Born ready," Tommy replied, adjusting his ever-present Yankees cap. "But you're still teaching the advanced stuff, right?" The advanced class had become one of the Hub's most popular programs. Former recipients of help now learned to help others, creating a continuing cycle of community service. Sarah ran the administrative side of things, having finally quit her diner job to manage the growing organization full-time. "Remember when we could barely keep the lights on?" she mused, joining them at the front desk. "Now look at this place." The statistics told an impressive story. In just 1 year, the Martinez Act had helped establish 500 community repair centers. Nationwide, 1 to 200 small business grants for community service initiatives, 50,000 completed repairs for low-income families, 10,000 trained volunteers, but the numbers didn't capture the real impact. That was found in stories like Mrs. Henderson's granddaughter opening her own community-focused auto shop, or the veteran who'd received free repairs, starting a program helping other vets learn trades. The morning ceremony marked both the Act's anniversary and the launch of new initiatives. Senator Rodriguez arrived early, taking time to chat with students and examine their projects. She'd become a regular visitor, often bringing other legislators to see the model in action. "Washington can learn a lot from what's happening here," she told Joe. "This is policy meeting reality in the best possible way." The Hub's main hall filled quickly. Local residents mixed with national media and government officials. President Coleman had sent a video message, unable to attend in person, but eager to share his thoughts. A year ago, his image declared to the assembled crowd. We passed a law that recognized what Joe Martinez already knew, that business and community service aren't opposing forces. They're partners in building a stronger nation. Joe watched. From the back, still more comfortable with a wrench than a spotlight. The wall behind him told the story of the year in photos and news clippings, the first graduation ceremony for adult learners. Tommy teaching the president about wheelchair maintenance, Sarah organizing the national database of repair volunteers. Bill, Jen, now the hub's official photographer, captured the moment when Tommy took the podium. The boy who'd once worried about keeping up at recess now commanded attention effortlessly. Before the Martinez movement, I thought being in a wheelchair meant always needing help, Tommy began. Now I know it means I can help others in ways nobody else can. Because I don't just know how to fix wheelchairs, I know what it means to need one fixed. The applause was interrupted by a commotion at the door. A group of international visitors had arrived, representatives from community, repair programs in Canada, Mexico and Europe, all inspired by the Martinez model. It's becoming a global movement, Sarah whispered to Joe. Your father's lesson about fixing what needs fixing. It translates into every language. As the ceremony continued, Joe slipped away to the original shop area. He found Miguel, now a certified mechanic, teaching a young woman how to adjust brake cables. In the corner, Mrs. Henderson's Buick sat waiting for its regular maintenance. The security camera that had captured the original viral moment still blinked steadily, recording this quiet continuation of what had started that night. Some things had changed dramatically, but others remained beautifully the same. Joe picked up a wrench from his father's toolbox, now used more for teaching than repairs. The worn handle felt like a connection between past and future, between one man's simple philosophy and a movement that had transformed a nation. You were right, Papa, he murmured. Fix what needs fixing, help who needs helping. The rest takes care of itself. The architects laid out the blueprints across Joe's workbench, their crisp blue lines a stark contrast to the oil-stained surface. The plans showed an ambitious expansion. The Martinez Institute for Community Innovation, a nationwide network of training centers built on the model that had started in his small shop. Each location will combine repair services, technical training, and community outreach, the lead architect explained. But we want them all to feel like your shop, places where people help people. Joe traced the outline of the first planned building with a calloused finger. The design incorporated elements from his original shop, the open workspace, the teaching areas, the community gathering spaces. But it was the proposed location that touched him most deeply, the vacant lot, where his father had first dreamed of opening their family business. Your father would have loved this, Sarah said softly, standing at his shoulder. She'd become more than just an administrator. She was now the Institute's executive director, bringing both heart and efficiency to the growing organization. Tommy wheeled up to examine the plans, now a teenager but still wearing his beloved Yankees cap. Look, they included my design for the adaptive tool station. His suggestion for adjustable height workbenches had become a standard feature in all Martinez facilities. The Institute represented more than just buildings. It was a framework for sustaining the movement's values for generations to come. The curriculum combined technical skills with community service principles, creating what educators were calling compassionate competence. President Coleman's father had taken a personal interest in the project, sharing lessons from his hardware store days. The tools change, he'd told Joe during a planning session, but the values don't. We're not just teaching repairs, we're teaching responsibility to community. The Foundation's board meeting that afternoon focused on ensuring those values would endure. They established a scholarship program for students committed to community service research grants for developing adaptive tools and accessible repair methods, partnerships with technical schools and universities, a mentorship network connecting experienced fixers with newcomers, international exchange programs sharing best practices globally. We need to make sure it stays true to its roots, Joe insisted during the discussion. Not just fixing things, but fixing them for the right reasons. Miguel, now the head instructor at the original hub, presented a solution. Every institute graduate would complete a community impact project, fixing something that mattered to their neighborhood. It wasn't enough to know how, they needed to understand why. Later that evening, as the hub quieted down, Joe found Tommy in the workshop, teaching a young girl in a wheelchair how to adjust her own brakes. The scene captured everything the Institute aimed to achieve: empowerment, education, and the continuation of care. You know what this means? Tommy asked the girl. Next time something needs fixing, you can help someone else. That's how it works. We all pass it on. The security camera recorded the moment, adding it to an archive that would eventually become part of the Institute's teaching materials. Future students would study not just repair techniques, but the history of how one act of kindness grew into a movement. Sarah found Joe in his office, looking at an old photo of his father. "The Institute is going to change so many lives," she said. "It already has," Joe replied, gesturing to the wall of success stories. "But you know what Papa would say. It's not about the buildings or the programs. It's about the people who walk through those doors looking for help and walk out ready to help others." Outside, the sun set on the hub's busy parking lot, where cars from across the country sat waiting for repair. Each represented a story, a need, an opportunity to continue what had started that night with Tommy's wheelchair. The Institute's motto, soon to be emblazoned on buildings nationwide, summed it up perfectly: fixing more than machines, building better communities. It was a legacy built not in marble and steel, but in the countless small acts of kindness it would inspire for generations to come. 2 years to the day after fixing Tommy's wheelchair, Joe stood in his shop's doorway at dawn. The morning light caught the edge of a new toolbox sitting on his workbench, a gift from Tommy to mark the anniversary. Inside, alongside a set of carefully chosen tools, was a note: "For the next generation of fixers." The shop looked different now. Training stations had replaced some of the storage spaces, and students' projects lined the walls alongside the historical photos, but the heart of it remained the same, a place where things got fixed and people found help. The bell chimed as Tommy wheeled in, now 15 and wearing a Martinez Institute instructor's badge alongside his Yankees cap. "Ready for today?" he asked, his wheelchair gliding smoothly across the floor, maintained now by his own skilled hands. "Almost," Joe replied, picking up his father's old toolbox. "Just needed a moment." Today marked more than just an anniversary. It was the official launch of the Institute's National Apprenticeship Program, and their shop would host the first class. Students from across the country would learn not just repairs, but the values that had started it all. Sarah arrived next, carrying coffee and the morning papers. The Martinez Act's success had made headlines again. Community commerce model goes global. But it was the local paper's story that caught Joe's eye. Local hero's legacy continues. "To grow, hero," Joe muttered, shaking his head. "I just fixed what needed fixing." "And taught others to do the same," Tommy added. "That's what makes it legacy." The first students began arriving, a diverse group united by their desire to learn and serve. Among them was Mrs. Henderson's granddaughter, now running her own community-focused shop in the next town. Miguel, a full instructor himself, began setting up the day's lesson plans. President Coleman's father had sent a special tool set for the occasion, along with a letter sharing his own memories of teaching repairs. "Tools build more than machines," he'd written. "They build bridges between people." As Joe prepared to welcome the class, he noticed a familiar face in the back. Bill Chen, older but still carrying his camera, had come to document another milestone. The security camera that had captured the original viral moment had been joined by proper recording equipment, preserving these lessons for future generations. "Before we start," Joe addressed the gathered students. "I want you to look around this shop. What you see isn't just tools and machines. It's proof that one small choice to help can grow into something bigger than ourselves." He gestured to Tommy, who wheeled forward with a smile. "My young colleague here is going to teach the first lesson, because he knows something I learned from my father. Sometimes the best way to fix things is to show others how to fix them themselves." Tommy began his demonstration, his confidence obvious as he explained the intricacies of adaptive repair techniques. The students leaned in, asking questions, taking notes, catching the spark of purpose that had ignited a movement. Sarah touched Joe's arm gently. "Look," she whispered. Through the window, they could see more people gathering. Community members bringing coffee and pastries, kids pressing their faces against the glass to watch, reporters setting up cameras. The whole town had come to celebrate, but it was the line of cars in the parking lot that told the real story. Each represented someone who needed help, who would receive not just repairs, but the knowledge to help others. The cycle would continue, growing stronger with each person touched by the movement. Joe picked up Tommy's gift toolbox, running his hands across its surface just as he had done with his father's so many times. One day, it too would carry the marks of countless repairs, countless lessons, countless moments of connection. "You know what, Papa?" he said quietly to the shop his father had started. "I finally understand what you meant. Every repair is a chance to make something better than it was before. And sometimes what we're really fixing isn't the machine at all." The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in its beam. Tools gleamed on workbenches, waiting for new hands to learn their use. The security camera blinked steadily, recording another day in a story that had no real ending. Just a continuous chain of people learning to help people, fixing what needed fixing, one small act of kindness